To get started with the metal object assignment, the first thing we need to do is to set up our workspace in millimeters, because the caliper we're going to use to measure this object is measuring in millimeters. To do this, you need to come up to your window, pull down, and find your model info. The model info has a whole bunch of tabs on the left-hand side, or selections along the left-hand side. The one we're interested in is units, and we can change this to decimal or engineering. In this case, I'm going to just change it to decimal, and I'm going to change this to millimeters because that's the units that are given to us by the caliper. Once you've done this, you can quick check by clicking on your origin and dragging a line out, and what you'll notice is that the bottom right-hand corner is now stated in decimal millimeters. So an entry of 1 will give you a very short 1 millimeter long line, and that's just to double check the way in which data is going to be entered. Now, moving forward with the construction of this metal object, a few recommendations I'm going to make. The circle tool, which I've already stated in an earlier video that this is actually a polygon tool set up with 24 sides, and if we create this large object, this large metal object with 24 sides in each of its circular surfaces, you're going to notice the edges. And so what I'm going to encourage you to do is to jump up to at least 48, if not higher than that, to ensure that your circles are nice and round. So I'm going to do that now. Before I click anything with my circle tool is on but not selected, I can type in 48 and hit enter. What that's doing is adding twice as many sides and ensuring that I have smoother facets. The sides there's less change between each side, and therefore they are less noticeable. Now, I'm going to place my object on the origin, and I'm going to try to drag all of my circles along an axis line. If you don't do this, your circles can become, or those facets can be offset slightly, which can later interfere with some of the next couple steps that we're going to run into. So in this case, I'm dragging along the red axis to drop my next line, or drop my first circle, actually, sorry. My first circle is going to be 45 millimeters, and then I'm going to come back straight over the red axis again, and I'm going to drop the next one at 100. If I activate my selection tool, I can delete the center. This is the hole. This is the thickness of the base. Now with the push-pull tool, I can add some thickness. Thickness, I believe, is 25 millimeters. So there's the start of this object. And another thing I like to do, it makes it a whole lot easier for me to get my circle snapped where I want it to, is to bring a line up off the origin, the length of which I've just created. So 25 millimeters of push-pull, I'm going to put a 25 millimeter long line in the middle. And I'll show you how that helps you in just a second. Next thing I want to create is the little ring. And so now, instead of floating over space trying to find the center of this surface, I can just go to the end of that line, click and drag, and now create the next circle, which in this case is going to reflect the size of the metal ring. Now, it's 28.5 from this outermost edge. So you need to subtract that, 28.5 from 100, which was the size of the outer ring, if I'm not mistaken. And you can pull up quickly through a spotlight search your calculator tool. 71.5. That isn't particularly difficult math, but it is pretty quick and easy to pull up the spotlight tool if you need a calculator. So 71.5. If you don't anchor your tool, it allows you to go off the screen and to search that stuff. So it's a quick way in which to, now I can come right back in and type in my 71.5 dimension for that next circle. I now need to also set the, actually I don't need to do that yet. I need to push-pull the height of that little lip, which in this case is 1.5 millimeters. So I get this super thin little edge that's elevated. And if I want to do this correctly or have that benefit of that line, I got to add 1.5 now to the length of my line in the center or off of my origin. With that taken care of, I can make sure I'm referencing the very tip of that new line, and I can come out here. And the thickness, whatever you determine the thickness to be, you can now hop right back into your calculator and subtract it from. Actually, my calculator is already open behind here. I can click on my calculator, and I can subtract from it the width that was given. So I'm at 68.5. Come back inside SketchUp, make sure I'm lining up on the red axis, and type in 68.5, which will give you the 3 millimeter edge or width to this raised edge around our larger tapered piece. Now, I didn't take a dimension for the next step. Or actually, I did take a dimension, but I didn't calculate it. So I'm just going to erase this line, hit delete, and apply a new line of the total height that I did take for the height of this object up along the blue axis at a total height of 90 millimeters. So that's where I dropped the end of my line, and now I can go back to push-pull, and I can pull up this object and then snap it to the end of that line, which will make sure that I'm at the appropriate height. I don't have to do the math for the thickness of each of these surfaces below it. I can just simply make sure I'm coming up the total height of 90 from the origin to ensure that I'm at the proper height.